So this is my speech outline, as well as my works cited page. When you see a burning flame, what's the first thing you think of? Now, I don't mean an open flame in a kitchen, which would probably result in you thinking, call the police, there's a fire, but rather a simple flame, like this one, or one burning in a fireplace or in a fire pit. See, some people see fire as something that's intriguing and exciting, and other people see it as something that's terrifying and dangerous. But not many people see fire as something that is purifying and life-giving. According to the United Religions Initiative, Zoroastrianism's view fire as the most sacred symbol there is. It's something that is life-giving and represents righteousness and truth within the world. Today I'm going to explain to you the roots of Zoroastrianism, as well as the symbolic significance of fire within their culture and the role of fire temples. So let's begin by looking at what Zoroastrianism is. Melton Gordon in Religions of the World, a comprehensive encyclopedia of beliefs and practices, tells us that Zoroastrianism is the ancient religion of Persia, or what we now know it as Iran. With its origins dating roughly 3,500 years ago, the Encyclopedia of Psychology and Religion states that Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest non-pantheistic religions and one of the world's first monotheistic religions. It was founded by the prophet Zarathustra, or in Greek he's known as Zoroaster, and in Farsi, which is Persian, he's known as Zarathustra. Zoroastrianism's foundations are based on this principle of two dualities within the world, one being good and one being evil. He thought that these two themes were a constant struggle within the world and within men themselves. And according to the Zendavesta, one of the holy books, which literally translates into commentaries on knowledge, in order to battle the evil within the world, one has to cultivate thoughts, good words, and good deeds. With these guiding principles, Zoroastrians began to practice a lifestyle of worship, and the goodness that comes about, they believe, comes through the pursuit of righteousness, justice, and purity, which are all of the things that are embodied within this flame. So now that you have some background on what Zoroastrianism is, let's take a look at what fire is within that culture before we get onto the fire temples. Within Zoroastrian worship, fire was considered a symbol of God. Now, it's not to be considered the embodiment of God or an idol of any kind. It's something that is just pursued and revered with holiness. And this holiness and reverence is just exemplified during prayer. According to the Heritage Institute, Zoroastrians hold that the effectiveness of a person's beliefs is demonstrated in their deeds. And while praying helps to reaffirm beliefs, a life based on good deeds is prayer in action. Our lives are the temples of our souls, and this is the natural progression of ethical creeds such as good thoughts, good words, good deeds. So when Zoroastrians pray, they face a fire. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a burning flame, but it just has to be a light source of any kind, because that light source depicts the holiness of God. So what's important is that this light is one that is present at all times, whether it's the sun during the day or a fire at night. Light is which guides the world. So we now understand the symbolic role of fire within the Zoroastrian life. And lastly, we're going to take a look at what Zoroastrian fire temples are. The Heritage Institute states that Zoroastrian communities built fire temples as mass houses of worship. Within these temples, there was an ever-present flame, as well as priests that would tend to this fire. Jamshid Chosky, in his article Fire Temples, says that a consecrated holy fire of the highest ritual grade is kept burning at all times within these temples. And BBC article Zoroastrian Worship reminds us that these fires represent the light of God and of our illuminated mind and beings. So, in addition to these aspects of fire that is constant and ever-present, the fire that burns for religious ritual is one that is holy and set apart, you could say. They're solely wood-burning fires, and Mary Boyce, in her book Zoroastrians, Their Religious Beliefs and Practices, states that they abide by the use of only dry wood and pure offerings. The wood that burns doesn't present any environmental toxins such as smoke, and the types of wood that are used are specific to those rituals. In addition, the priests that tend to these fires wear all white clothing so as to represent the holiness and purity that is in the world. Melton Gordon, in his Religions of the World, writes that within the temple itself, there's a primary fire, and this is known as the Atash Berham. And the temples that have this name are ones that are considered the largest and the still standing ones that were used from years and years and years ago. So as you can see, here's one of the fire temples in Yazd, Iran. It's a pretty standard building, not too large, not too small. The only thing that really stands out from it is the giant winged man on the top. This man was considered the ancient Persian symbol for Zoroastrianism. In the temple itself, the walls have placards which have verses from the Holy Book on them. And last but not least, there's the fire itself, which burns behind a glass casing so that it's not tampered with, and it's still holy and considered burning and untouched. So, thus far, I've explained to you the roots of Zoroastrianism, the symbolic reference of fire within the worship, as well as the placement of fire temples and how they're used as houses of worship. And while this may have just been a nice history lesson for you, and many of you will never hear about Zoroastrianism again, it's worth noting that many scholars attribute some of the fundamental truths of all world religions as having their roots in Zoroastrianism. And while you can't drive to the corner and see a Zoroastrian fire temple as you would see a church or a synagogue, it's worth noting that the Encyclopedia of American Religions from 2002 statistics states that there are still roughly 200,000 worshiping Zoroastrians around the world. So for those practicing Zoroastrianism is a way of life. It's a path that guides you to ultimate goodness. And it's through this cultivating of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds that people achieve this righteousness and this justice within the world. So next time you see a flame, like this one, think about the goodness in life. Think about the righteousness and the truth and the justice and purity that is embodied within this very flame.